Greetings and welcome to the 2026 National Invasive Species Awareness Week webinar series. My name is Tegan Wilmot and I serve as your Education and Prevention Manager at NISAW. Please say hello in the chat and share with us where you are joining from today. Thank you so much for being here for day 4 of National Invasive Species Awareness Week for our webinar, The Surprising Intersection Between Marine Invasive Species and Public Health. As we move into day 4 of National Invasive Species Awareness Week, I want to briefly reflect on the important conversations we have had so far. On Monday, we kicked off the week with 5 outstanding presentations from the U.S. Geological Survey that highlighted the critical role of science in invasive species management. From applying the One Health framework to advancing point-of-use eDNA tools to reducing wildfire risk from invasive vegetation in Hawaii and developing acoustic deterrents for invasive carp, the message was clear. Science strengthens our ability to detect and respond early. On Tuesday, we heard from Hannah McKenzie about Alberta's coordinated wild boar control efforts, including the challenges of sustaining funding and monitoring as populations become more rare. It was a powerful reminder that success requires long-term commitment and persistence. Yesterday, we expanded our lens internationally with a presentation on the comprehensive efforts to manage New World screwworm in Mexico. That conversation underscored the importance of cross-border coordination, strong surveillance systems, and sustained investment to protect livestock, wildlife, and rural economies from invasive pests. If you missed any of these sessions, recordings will be available on NISAW's YouTube channel next week. For those who may be joining us for the first time today, National Invasive Species Awareness Week, or NISAW, is an international event powered by NISAW that brings attention to invasive species, their impacts across North America, and the actions we can take to prevent their spread. This year's theme is Defending Our Health by Stopping the Spread. It highlights how invasive species affect not only ecosystems, but also human health, food systems, infrastructure, recreation, and community well-being. It also emphasizes proactive prevention, early detection, and coordinated response as essential strategies to reduce risk. NISAW brings together practitioners, researchers, policymakers, and community members to elevate the importance of invasive species prevention and management. Throughout the week, we are also sharing ways for you to engage with your elected officials so they hear directly from you about why this work matters and why sustained support is critical. We still have one fantastic webinar planned for tomorrow, highlighting the connections between invasive species and food security in the United States. We encourage you to visit our website to register. And again, if you've missed any of our sessions this week, recordings will be posted to our YouTube channel sometime next week. Before we welcome our speaker today, I would like to take a moment to share a brief overview of NISAW for those of you who may be new to our organization. NISAW, the North American Invasive Species Management Association, is a nonprofit organization, and our mission is to empower invasive species management in North America. We serve professionals, practitioners, and researchers working across disciplines to prevent, detect, and manage invasive species. NISAW is guided by 16 board members and supported by 10 active committees that help shape and strengthen our programs. We have a team of 7 staff members and a membership that continues to grow each year. We currently communicate with over 15,000 subscribers and engage with over 38,000 social media followers. And during National Invasive Species Awareness Week last year, our collective outreach reached more than 3.4 million people, and we're excited to continue expanding that impact this year. At NISAW, we provide the connection, the voice, and the tools needed to address invasive species across North America. Our work is organized around these 3 core pillars. We create opportunities for collaboration and knowledge exchange through webinars, summits, our annual conference, and professional discussion boards. We elevate invasive species issues on a national stage through our government relations program and initiatives like National Invasive Species Awareness Week. And we equip our members and partners with practical resources for prevention, management, and outreach. This includes Play Clean Go, the NISAW Shop, the Certified Weed-Free Products Program, Mapping Data Standards, and NISAW Academy. As we continue celebrating National Invasive Species Awareness Week, I also want to quickly highlight the NISMA shop at shop.nisma.org. You'll find boot brush stations and replacement parts, buckbone blasters, apparel, outreach materials, and more. These are practical tools that support prevention and management efforts across North America. In honor of National Invasive Species Awareness Week, you can use code NISAW26 to get 10% off your purchase. Members can stack their member discount on top of that. Every purchase supports NASMA's programming. This promotion is only available this week, so be sure to take advantage of it while it lasts. One of the most important ways we facilitate connection is through our NASMA annual conference. Each year, over 300 invasive species professionals gather to share research, case studies, and management experiences. This year's conference will be held in Alexandria, Virginia from October 19th through the 22nd, with the theme Local Leadership, Global Impact. We have some great keynote speakers lined up already, and registration is now open. We are also accepting abstracts, and you can learn more on our website. As a friendly reminder, your membership dues help to fund our educational programs like this webinar. If you're not currently a member, we offer a variety of different membership options. You can view our membership structure on our website, nasma.org. If you're unable to become a member right now, we encourage you to make a donation. Every gift, no matter the size, helps to support our programming. One of our newest member benefits is our NASMA discussion boards. When you become a member, you'll have access to these boards where you can ask your peers questions, share resources, discuss emerging challenges, and learn from peers across different sectors. We also have invasive species news, job opportunities, and trainings listed too. We're really excited about this new member benefit and hope you will join us on the discussion board soon. If you want to sponsor NASMA in a bigger way, our Premier Partner program is designed for you. Premier Partners enjoy benefits throughout the year, including acknowledgement on our website, at events, and more. We would like to acknowledge and thank all of our 2026 Premier Partners whose generosity helps to make events like this webinar possible. And now we'll get started with our main event. Thank you for joining us today for our NISAW webinar, The Surprising Intersection Between Marine Invasive Species and Public Health. Before we begin, a quick note for our audience. Please put your questions in the Q&A box so we can make sure to address them after the presentations. Take a look first to see if your question has already been asked, and if so, give it a thumbs up to promote it to the top of the list. To get us started, I'd like to welcome Christy Martin from the University of Hawaii at Manoa. Christy has worked on terrestrial and marine invasive species issues in Hawaii and the Pacific region for more than 25 years. She is the program manager and information officer for the Coordinating Group on Alien Pest Species, a partnership of agencies and organizations working to protect Hawaii from the impacts of invasive species. In 2022, Christy was appointed to the Invasive Species Advisory Committee, or ISAC, which provides information and advice for consideration by the National Invasive Species Council, and was reappointed in 2025 as ISAC chair, where she co-led the development of a white paper on marine biosecurity. Christy, thank you so much for joining us today, and you may now share your slides.
Mahalo, thank you so much. Thanks everybody for joining today. I'm really excited to be able to share the surprising link between marine invasive species and public health. As was mentioned, this was part of a white paper that was developed by the Invasive Species Advisory Committee at the request of the National Invasive Species Council, NISC. I'll go over a little bit more about these two groups in just a moment, but that white paper was titled Opportunities to Improve Marine Biosecurity, and it was adopted at the end of last year by the full ISAC, so it becomes official advice to the federal government. So I'm happy to be able to share this, and at the end of this talk, I have a QR code where you can get to the website and get this and other ISAC white papers. We'll also be able to put that link directly into the chat as this talk goes on. So let's get started. First of all, what is NISC? The National Invasive Species Council, if folks haven't heard it before. These are the agencies and offices that at the federal level have some intersection and responsibility for managing invasive species. And it is co-chaired by the Secretaries of Interior, Secretary of Agriculture, as well as the Secretary of Commerce. And together with the National Invasive Species Council staff, they have a small but mighty and amazing staff. They are able to coordinate and provide high-level vision and leadership that's absolutely necessary to sustain and expand federal efforts to prevent invasive species and safeguard the U.S. from the impacts of invasive species. So that is the NISC. And so what is ISAC? Well, it's the Invasive Species Advisory Committee, and this is a federal advisory committee. That is, it serves at the request of federal government. And it is comprised of non-federal representatives like myself, University of Hawaii, that have expertise in invasive species. And the ISAC provides information and advice for consideration by the NISC on particular invasive species that they request advice on. And this advice comes in the form usually of white papers. And so I've got some screenshots of white papers. Down below, there's a whole list of topics and white papers. So the ISAC, the 2025-2026 appointed members, I've got a little asterisk there in that the ISAC is no longer operating. It was no longer continued as an official advisory committee of the federal government. However, our advice still stands. The appointed members for this white paper and for all of the white papers include these members at the top. We do have non-voting advisors. And I've put with a double asterisk the subcommittee that developed this marine biosecurity white paper. And those include Leah Elwell, Ted Grossholtz, Deal Lawrence, Dennis Zabaglo, Paul Zajac, as well as our non-voting advisors, Nicole Jelly, Christy Trifon-Milhall served on this committee, Bill Simshauser. And we also had some invited external contributors that helped meet with us and review versions of the draft paper and provide substantive comments. And I wanted to recognize those folks as well. So James Carlton, folks know him as one of the authors of marine biosecurity issues across the US and internationally. Chris Shiani, Catherine O'Shaughnessy, Kalani Reyes, Mario Tamburi, and Frank Villagomez. So together with my committee members, we present this information to you. So we start off with our paper, first of all, with definitions. You know, so often we hear of this issue as aquatic invasive species, and sometimes it's really buried in there. So we wanted to carve out a space and really focused on marine invasive species issues. So we include a definition. I'll share that with you right now. These are the marine and estuarine species that are moved by people or as the result of our actions to a region where they're not native or naturally occurring, and whose introduction causes or is likely to cause economic or environmental harm or harm to human, animal, or plant health. So that's the definition we're going with for our talk today. Marine biosecurity, that also needed a little bit of explanation. Biosecurity is a term that's used frequently outside of the US, so we wanted to provide a definition here. Biosecurity in general, and marine biosecurity in particular for this paper, is strategic, integrated, and coordinated approach to prevent or reduce the introduction, establishment, and spread, and the negative impacts of marine invasive species. And just some overarching why. It's because the US marine economy and all of the sectors and so many of the people rely on healthy marine environments. And this was a great report, some economic statistics gathered by two agencies under the Department of Commerce, that's Bureau of Economic Analysis and NOAA. And they used 2023 data to produce this report that came out last year and really quantified what is the value and what are the sectors that really add to the marine economy. What is driven by a healthy and productive marine economy? Well, you can see it's $511 billion in GDP and $827 billion in sales. And so we have to protect these resources so that we can have healthy marine environments that drive this sector of the economy. And so I also wanted to point out sort of big picture stuff first, and then we'll really drill down. But there was a great paper that was done by Bailey et al. There's a lot of authors on this one that was done in 2020 that used 50 years of data, not just for marine invasive species, but also estuarine and freshwater species, so the full suite of aquatic invasive species. They looked at 50 years of data for introductions. And basically on the left, you can see a heat map. The darker the color, the more number of occurrences of introduced species that are noticeable and causing impacts to those areas. In Hawaii, where I'm sitting, is bright red, as are a lot of regions in the US. So this is an issue that impacts the US for sure. This paper also looked at the number of records by pathway. Pathways are the ways things get to different regions. And so when you look at the right-hand side, you can see that transport via vessels is a top contributor, and that is by ballast water and ship fouling. I've circled those in red. My red circle is a little bit low, but there it is. It also quantified the number of occurrences over that 50-year period by like there is a bunch of spread by connected waterways. So this is spread in an area. Aquaculture, mariculture escape was also a documented pathway. Transport that is contaminant on animals. These are purposefully imported animals, whether aquaculture or aquarium species or food. And so that also accounted for some species. I wanted to point out, though, one of the lowest ones that was almost zero across the board, so very few, was pet and aquarium species. And I want to pause here and say that that trend is actually changing. And we here in Hawaii are documenting frontline those changes. We have a data set that I just pulled out for this talk and want to report to you. In the last 10 years, there have been 13 non-native marine aquarium species detected in Hawaii water. So these are in the environment on the reef. All of them are illegal to import into the state and possess. Yet there they are, and we're finding them, and they are spreading. Yet the 20 years before that, there was only one. So that rate of increase is pretty significant, and I think it is the tip of the iceberg, the beginning of a trend. And I don't think Hawaii is different from the rest of the US. I think this is something that is going to be, that purple line is going to go up. So reporting, though, back again, going a little bit big picture, and that is I wanted to share a little bit about why this is a wicked problem. You know, marine invasive species in general are a big problem, but when you add changing environmental conditions, whether it be warmer oceans or stronger storms or more acidic waters, all of those are having an interaction with marine invasive species. So I want to go through a few of what those are just to draw some connections in people's brains. I had to do this. It took me a while to make this slide when I started making these talking points. But invasive species are the greatest driver of native biodiversity loss, that is extinctions on islands, and they're a top driver in continental systems. They weaken, smother, crowd out, outcompete, kill, or eat, in the case of the lionfish, other marine life that is part of that ecosystem. And when it has a big impact, it can cause entire phase shifts. And this is a term that isn't frequently used outside of marine invasive species, but phase shifts is when you have a complete change of an environmental system, from the species to the water conditions to the quality of the water across the board. And some spread is exacerbated by climate trends, these different changing climate patterns that we are seeing and experiencing. Some degrade the resilience of reefs and nearshore ecosystems and reduce the ability to buffer storms and wave energy to protect those shorelines. A great example of that is the pathogen that causes stony coral tissue loss. When it was first detected on the Florida Keys, it started killing multiple species of stony corals. These corals are natural infrastructure that protect the shoreline, as well as the surrounding reef environment, above and beyond what they do naturally as food and shelter for species. But this pathogen has spread to the Caribbean region and has caused widespread mortality of a number of stony corals. And we're going to start seeing more and more impacts as time moves forward with that pathogen. Some species are successful under a wide variety of conditions. I'll talk about one of those species in just a moment. And some can alter water quality and concentrate toxins. I've got an example here. This is Gracilaria from Hawaii, and it forms thick mats on the reef that prevent the use of habitat, hidey holes for species, prevent the use of food resources, really squashes the food web. But it also, a colleague here who's a former ISAC member, Celia Smith, also found that this species is creating a new chemical environment. It makes the water more acidic under and around these mats. So acid, as folks know, makes it really tough for things that use calcium to grow, species like coral. So it is an ecosystem engineer at a small scale, but when it spreads, it gets to major scales. The projected range expansion of marine pathogens mirrors terrestrial pathogen expansion and vector expansion. So we are seeing that in the marine environment as well, and increased ocean temperatures can increase virulence of pathogens. And if that all weren't bad enough, which it is, we've got worse things because we've got changing geopolitics. We've got new source regions for novel species to emerge, changing trade patterns and transport patterns that really complicate our ability to do what we know and use information we've gathered in the past to really address this issue. So it just complicates things. I'm sorry, I'm going to bum you out just a little bit more before I come to some recommendations and some high points, honestly. So other marine invasive species considerations, marine invasive species economic cost is really undercounted for lots of reasons. There was a great InvaCost study that was done. Cuthbert et al. Took some of that InvaCost information from Diagni et al. And did a paper in 2021 looking at marine invasive species and aquatics and found that of the records of species impacts in the marine environment, which are 234 records, which is tiny compared to the thousands and thousands of data points that the terrestrial environment had, but regardless, these 234 records equaled $3.6 billion in cost. And note that it doesn't include other costs, things like what's the cost to vessels for ballast water treatment systems? What's the cost of mitigating for invasive species impacts in the first place? My second bullet is we don't have included in here the cost of losing cultural practices, ways of life, quality of life. My example on the top here is the European green crab that's decimating resources and environments that Native peoples use and rely on. These are parts of their traditions. They go out with their families to collect, to prepare the foods. When these things don't happen, what is the cost? It's not necessarily an invasive species cost, but it's social ties and ancestral practices that are broken, and that is undercounted. Moving forward, biofouling, that's the collection of species on wetted surfaces of vessels, either on the hulls, as my bottom picture shows, or in those tiny niche areas. Biofouling of power infrastructure and aquaculture adds maintenance costs. It adds cost to our seafood. It adds cost to our power. Moving down on these costs and looking forward now, the global maritime traffic numbers are projected to increase by 1,200% by 2050 and yield an up to 20-fold increase in global marine invasion risk. Great paper, super scary. So this is like a red flag. We've got to get our act together. This is projected to increase by 2050. And we know that biofouling of vessels spreads invasive species and also creates drag and noise and results in increased fuel use, emissions, cleaning and coating costs. Yet there is no national program for helping vessels clean at the points where they can prevent these costs. So, and there's no real equipment testing that's done for this equipment in the US. And there's no international binding agreement or law of the sea related to biofouling. So this is a red flag for us as well. We know that the US is focused on increasing aquaculture and mariculture. There's been a number of executive orders as well as an actual increase in the value of aquaculture and mariculture in recent years. And I already mentioned that marine aquarium ownership is an issue. It is a growing issue across the globe, but US is the biggest consumer of these species. And I want to point out that there are big gaps in the data on the species being imported into the US. You think that the US checks everything, knows everything that's coming in. We don't collect information like just basic names of species coming in for a variety of taxa, and this puts us at risk. I want to state the obvious for some. Marine environments are not easy for people to work in. So there's few tools that are available for detection and control in marine environments, and eradications are rare. So I'm an optimist. I say there's lots of room for improvement. We've got, the sky's the limit. If you want to work in this industry, that's your calling card right there. So let's move into those health impacts. And I've got a couple of case studies to share. The first one being toxigenic Vibrio cholera O1 serotype Inaba, biotype L-Tor, Vibrio cholera. And for just ease, I'm going to call it Vibrio cholera in this talk. That's what I mean, though. There's a lot of different strains and types of Vibrio. It is a waterborne pathogen that's transmitted via contaminated drinking water and food. Vibrio cholera, again, a lot of strains, and it's naturally occurring in a variety of different warm aquatic environments. And it can also survive for long periods in marine and brackish water environments by attaching itself to copepods like zooplankton, shrimp and crabs and other species. So what happened? One or more vessels arriving in a port in Peru discharged a virulent strain of Vibrio cholera, which had been picked up in the ballast water, taken up in an Asian port for stabilization, taken across and discharged in Peru. This discharge resulted in what was deemed the seventh pandemic, which started in January 1991 with some cases in that port city, and then it spread throughout South and Central America. Through 1997, it continued to spread, just causing more and more sickness, eventually sickening 1.2 million people and leading to nearly 12,000 deaths. So it really was the seventh pandemic, and it caused a lot of concern. Some of that, US started taking notice right away. So there was some concern. This is part two of my case study. There was concern about shellfish, particularly in the Gulf area, US Gulf. And they said, hey, we've got Vibrio we're detecting in our shellfish. Is it a match for this toxigenic Vibrio cholera down in South America? And so that really kicked off the US government. The FDA and Coast Guard got to work. They started surveying vessels in US Gulf ports and surveyed 19 vessels, their ballast water as well as other non-potable water samples. Where is this? Are we finding Vibrio cholera and what strain is it? They detected out of the 19 vessels, 5 of them were a match for the toxigenic Vibrio cholera, the same strain that was affecting Latin America. And 4 of those vessels had come from Latin American ports. The good thing is that it wasn't a match for the shellfish in the Gulf. And the good news is FDA put in place some protective measures so that our shellfish is, and honestly, our food system is much more protected in the US. So right on FDA. But a similar nationwide effort then sampled 109 ships across the US, 6 of which also was found to have matches for the South America strain of Vibrio cholera. So we did have an issue for connectivity, and ballast water was confirmed to be a carrier for Vibrio cholera. So what does this result in? Did we learn our lesson? Yes. Wow, I like to point to that when we actually learn lessons and put in place systems. So this is one of them. These and other incidents led to best management practices, then regulations at the national and international levels, and including state level, and included tools like the ballast water treatment systems and the US system for testing ballast water treatment systems to make sure that it can address toxigenic Vibrio cholera in ballast. There's international binding regulations now for vessels traveling international waters, have to manage these things. So it is not a perfect system by any means, but it is much better than what we had prior to the 1990s. So win there. I want to switch gears just a little bit and turn to my next case study, and that is jellyfish. That shouldn't be a surprise to anybody. But the depth of it was really a surprise to me, despite the fact that I work in this area and I have direct experience with some of these. There's lots of stories, you can Google them, but invasive stinging jellyfish are getting transported in ballast water as well as in biofouling, so attached to hulls and in niche areas, because they have a variety of life stages where they can catch a ride just about in a variety of different life stages and establish in new locations. One of them, I came across a recent story a couple years ago, is this tiny jellyfish. It's really about the size of a dime. And this New Jersey, it started invading this area. It has since spread, and it sends people to the hospital. Despite its small size, it's got a very severe sting. And every summer now, they send out a warning to people using the marine environment that they have to be careful of jellyfish. I want to also point out an issue in Hawaii. So, Hawaii, every month, about 9 to 10 days after a full moon, we have a bloom of jellyfish, box jellyfish, that stings people and sends people to the hospital, me being one of them. It has not been confirmed that this is a introduced species, but I will say it was not seen in Hawaii, not recorded to Hawaii. We've got a very long tradition of Native Hawaiians documenting species and naming them. It was not seen before 1877, I believe is the year. Hawaii had already been a place for whaling before that. It already enjoyed 100 years of Western contact. So we know that there were lots of opportunities for these jellyfish to be introduced, and now it causes every month jellyfish blooms. And I had to go to San Francisco paper to get this article because they're not widely reported about how many people get stung every year on Hawaii papers. So other jellyfish impacts beyond direct human health impacts, here's one from Sweden. This species of jellyfish, moon jellies, native to Asia, Indo-Pacific area, got transferred to other places, Sweden being one. And every year it has become larger and larger influxes during warm months. And jellyfish, this one year, clogged the intake pipes of a Swedish nuclear reactor. Of course, they take in water for cooling purposes. If you don't have cooling, you can't have that reaction going. So they shut it down so that they didn't have a nuclear meltdown. And so that was kind of a surprise at that point, but it shouldn't be a surprise anymore because it's happening more and more frequently. Just last year, as we were writing this paper, a French disaster, very similar thing, and the same species. Again, not native to France, but it hit this nuclear reactor, clogged the cooling waters. They had to shut down this nuclear power plant. So although it is not a direct impact, it certainly has follow-on public health impacts. So I included those here. And not only that, jellyfish are going to be one of those winners in the warming seas that we are seeing. And I just put a couple of articles here that folks can look at that are concurring with the data. It's not just me coming up with, hey, it looks like a trend. It actually does look like a trend, and they're being published. So this paper, let's get to the paper. There are 4 areas of opportunity we decided to focus on as a subcommittee. Sorry for this. We didn't want to focus on everything under the sea. So we focused on the best opportunities and the need for progress in opportunity areas that didn't have enough progress yet. One of them, opportunity area number one, is biofouling. Area number two is horizon scanning. We got to do a better job of predicting. Opportunity area number three, we've got a lot of new tools, but we need some work on them. And opportunity area number four is we already have some great stuff going on. We can't lose that momentum. And that is in the area of collaboration and engagement. So if you go to the white paper, we've got a cheat sheet for you. And it summarizes the 10 recommendations we have for federal agencies. The paper advises the federal agencies on what can be done and what should be done. But it's also good for business and academia and states and other non-federal agencies. There's some good advice for everybody here. The recommendations also include some overarching data and policy needs that don't fit directly into some of those four opportunity areas. So I'm calling them out here and I've highlighted them in yellow. Number one is conduct a comprehensive analysis of the impacts of marine invasive species on the U.S. marine economy and the foundations, right? So we need better numbers. We need some digits. Number six is develop and implement procedures to better collect data and potentially manage the species purposefully imported into the US. And it's a policy issue because no single agency collects these data. That connects to number seven. We need to clarify those gaps in legal authorities that prevent agencies from taking action, either prevention or response, for some of these high-risk marine species and taxa that fall outside of federal agency authorities. So area number one, let's get into a few direct recommendations. There's available technologies that the US really isn't looking at a whole lot. There's some great papers that were done, but there's available technologies like in-water cleaning that can clean vessel hulls before they get to fouling. There's available guidance for managing biofouling, not just for the vessel industry, but for the larger sector, so for infrastructure and aquaculture. And also, notably, this past year, just as we were deciding on our topic, April 2025, the international community decided to move forward with the development of international law, a legally binding framework for managing biofouling. So we got to get our act in gear, don't we? Our recommendations include, hey, use the guidelines. They're available. Second one is invest in research and development and independent verification to advance biofouling prevention and management approaches. These are things like, honestly, paints and hull coatings, in-water cleaning technologies, and other approaches. We have to develop so that we're ready for when international binding legislation comes out and to address these issues. And continue to engage. If we are not at the table, we're subject to whatever everybody else decides. Opportunity area number two is horizon scanning. Honestly, folks have heard about it. It is a cost-effective strategy, and it can take into account changing geopolitical and trade patterns. There is some great statistics about how useful they've been, and I'm going to share some of them. In the UK, of the 31 of 92 species flagged in a 2013 horizon scan, those arrived within 10 years. And in Cyprus, 10 of 26 newly detected invasive species had been predicted by prior horizon scans, with 8 of those species ranked as high risk. They knew before, and we can too. So we need to conduct internal reviews, whether at the programmatic level, all the way to a national level, to incorporate horizon scans. I want to call out the U.S. National EDRR framework that the NISC has been working a lot on with agencies. We need to expand to include marine systems in these horizon scans. It is one of the gaps or opportunities, and so we urge agencies to do that. Area number three, emerging tools and technologies. Everybody thinks, oh, eDNA, eRNA, remote sensing, AI, all of that. And yes, we do need to continue to invest in those. But we also need to continue to invest in just the background science and taxonomy that's needed to be able to give these eDNA and AI and remote sensing tools the framework it needs to be able to function as point of use tools. So yes, don't just invest in the flashy, also invest in the background information that holds up, that provides the framework for these tools. We also wanted to point out that, you know what, we have so few tools in the marine environment. We want to encourage adaptive management of existing tools. And I've got an example here. This was the USGS National Wildlife Health Center, Honolulu Field Station, Terry Work and his team that used ESTP funding, Department of Defense funding, to basically take what is essentially a diver warming system to scale it up to deliver hot water to control invasive marine species. We used it on soft coral, an invasive soft coral aquarium species, killed it dead as a doornail, right on. New tool. Opportunity area number 4, collaborations and engagement. I hate to not mention something that is working so well because when it disappears or when it gets diminished, we can't ever say that it was great. And I want to say it is great. We have great examples at all levels of the collaboration that's going on in the US as well as internationally. And second, the engagement part is most people don't want to experience the negative effects of marine invasive species. We got an easy sell. But addressing the different marine invasive species pathways really requires communicating directly with the stakeholder groups responsible for those pathways. So this is targeted engagement and messaging. We've got good examples there, but we need to expand. So our recommendation, the first one, continue to collaborate regionally, locally, and internationally. We need to be at the table at all of those levels. The second one, expand and improve outreach and communications with key stakeholder groups. I've got a great example that I put below. As an initiative of the U.S. Coral Reef Task Force and ANS Task Force, they formed a multi-agency subcommittee, including EPA, Coast Guard, other federal state agencies, subject matter experts, territories were in the discussion. Together, they developed communications on how mariners can minimize the risk of transporting the pathogens that cause stony coral tissue loss. The Coast Guard then put it out on their notice to mariners and in blogs, and it was great communications, excellent teamwork. All of those things need to continue. So what are our next steps? Well, keep going. Go team, go. People are working to address these things at all levels. I hope we all continue and honestly expand. Keep collaborating to find solutions. We're all engaging, and hopefully the federal agencies can continue to engage where they need to into the future. Keep drawing those connections. I had kind of a hard time with drawing some of the connections for this presentation, and honestly, the white paper our entire team did, because sometimes we have different language. As an example, public health uses different language than we do in invasive species, yet we're talking about the same thing. And don't forget to celebrate accomplishments of all sizes and scan the QR code if you'd like more ISAC white papers, including this one. And we'll put that in the chat if it hasn't happened already. And I just want to say on behalf of the subcommittee, the entire ISAC, and honestly, the NISC team, thank you so much for joining, and I can take questions. Mahalo.
Thank you so much, Christy. That was fantastic. You're getting some great reactions here. So here's a question for you, and I was going to ask something similar, but how can we in our societies help you out? So what can people joining the conversation today, what can we do to help these recommendations move forward?
Yeah, I think everybody does play a role. As an example, some folks on this call in their agencies, they make decisions about, for example, permits for things to be imported, incorporate some of these processes. If you're curious about horizon scanning and looking out to see what the next thing is, that's a great initiative. It doesn't need to be for the marine environment. You can use horizon scanning for terrestrial issues, so you can engage there. I would say, even if you're interested in helping out via social media, sharing and liking posts, or sharing little questions, hopefully to continue dialogue. I really feel like marine invasive species has been a part of AIS, aquatic invasive species. Everybody can list off trouble with like zebra, quagga mussels, and things like that. But so few know what's going on in the marine environment. And I think we really have to not just be part of that community, but also forge our own communication path and start communicating specifically about the marine environment.
No, I think that's very important. We have another question here. Public marine aquaria, for example, the Monterey Bay Aquarium, do not currently have public awareness exhibits on marine invasive species. So they're wondering how we can encourage more public education in aquaria.
Yeah, power to the people. Actually, you can play a role there. You can ask. You can ask, why aren't there, or are there, or how can we help get some? And so at whatever level you're willing to engage in that, I think aquaria are very responsive to education requests. Museums are as well. Here in Hawaii, we are working with our Waikiki Aquarium to put in exhibits. We are working with our Bishop Museum to also put in exhibits. I think it's just a space that is ripe for moving into, and you can play a role in doing that. So yeah, lots of opportunities, and I encourage you to do that, to ask.
I think that's great. I also liked one of the points you made about the challenges dealing with marine species, in that you don't have those clear boundaries that you might if you were dealing with a species in a lake. So, in terms of those success stories of managing them or monitoring for species, is there any more you can say about that, about how we can try to address those
Yeah,
challenges?
let me paint a picture. So you go and you walk a trail. You see something, you say something, hopefully someone does something. The marine environment, how often do you swim in San Francisco Bay or the harbor? How often are you going in, freezing cold waters where, maybe visibility is pea soup? How often is anybody able to go into a harbor? That's a high risk location, right?
Yeah.
So detection is extremely hard. We don't have the number of eyeballs or the tools available to easily see something. Even our eyes, we can't use our eyes. Um, so how do we do that? Man, that's where some things like eDNA and honestly old school technology is going to play a role. Smithsonian Environmental Research Center, they do plankton tows, sediment grabs and dredges and things like that, settling plates to see what's coming into San Francisco to hopefully get a jump on something quickly and early. We have a little bit more of an opportunity where our waters are clear. I can see straight into Harbor most times. So we have to develop solutions across the board for situations like this. Um, and honestly, you folks coming up as engineers, maybe your kid's going to be an engineer. Like, hey, dude, this is a really cool spot to work. Lots of opportunity, lots of room for R&D. There's certainly some master's and PhD projects out there ripe for the taking.
No, I think that's great. So we have a question here now, or a comment here, just mentioning that the management of marine invasive species is many years behind management of freshwater AIS. And perhaps we need to, maybe NASMA could play a role in this, of facilitating more collaboration among freshwater AIS management research and marine ecological researchers in some kind of workshops. And I think that is a great idea. There's definitely tools that work for both and lessons that we can learn. But like you said, so much unknown in the marine environment. But I like the idea of getting some of these young people to start. I think we've talked about this before. We've had talks on invasive algae in marine environments, and how that's not necessarily the sexy thing to be studying. You want to go study whales and sea turtles, and but there's just so much to learn from these species, and you can be in these amazing environments. I know when we've seen all the images of coral reefs and things, it sounds pretty nice to me right now.
It would be great to see more. So many times we have talks that are specifically on invasive aquatic species, separate from other issues. And so many times they're like this, right? They are intersecting issues. and maybe more cross-pollination, my puns keep coming, could
I love that.
assist. But yeah, thanks, Lars.
Oh, that's great. Oh, very good. Well, I think we will move to our final slides now to close out. But I just want to thank you again, Christy, for joining us, and thank our audience for being here today to celebrate National Invasive Species Awareness Week. So here at NISMA, we do like to end our information sharing sessions with a call to action. And today we'd like to ask you to send a letter to your federal representatives in the House and Senate asking to support the Mitigation and Waterman Support Act of 2025. This bill would direct the Secretary of Commerce to establish a pilot program with respect to the sale of invasive blue catfish caught within the Chesapeake Bay watershed. You can either scan this QR code or we will put the link in the chat here. We have several bills included on this muster letter, all related to invasive species. And so hopefully you can take a look at that. And lastly, again, we do have one more webinar scheduled for this week. So you can register for that at nasma.org/NISAW. But we look forward to seeing you then as we continue to celebrate National Invasive Species Awareness Week. As a reminder, we'll be posting all of our NISAW webinars on NASMA's YouTube channel sometime next week. But thank you again. Thank you, Christy, and thanks everyone for joining us, and enjoy the rest of your day.